Philosophy and Logic, a Concise Approach. Edited by Professor Nkeli Wetapla. What philosophy is, looked at by you, George. Introduction. Philosophy as a subject is studied and taught in most universities in the world. A section devoted to philosophy can be found in almost every large library and most large bookshops. But what is this philosophy that is taught and studied in universities and other institutions of higher learning? What is contained in books that are devoted to philosophical topics? This introductory chapter intends to provide an answer. Our concern here is what is sometimes called academic philosophy, a philosophy that is taught and studied in most universities and in some schools. Some people who employ the word philosophy do not use it in the above sense. An economist may talk about the philosophy of market economy, the gibberish about the philosophy of eating and drinking, and a farmer may talk about the philosophy that underlies the way in which he engages his farming business. What such people mean by philosophy is roughly a general view of a subject, which in a way underlies what they do. Academic philosophy too involves general views, modus vivendi cum operandi, but it involves much more than these, and it is this much more that earns its place in institutions of higher education. It is difficult to define philosophy in such a way that it is acceptable to all. In fact, there are as many definitions of philosophy as there are philosophers. However, we shall examine a few of them. Etymologically, philo derives from the Greek phlein, to love, and sophia, wisdom, love of wisdom. But the meaning is somewhat obscure and reflects Greek rather than other view of philosophy. However, two principal notions, knowledge and a way of life, have been historically asserted of philosophy. The word philosopher contains the two different meanings of the man who possesses certain knowledge and the man who acts in a particular way. These two notions are essentially the two ways of interpreting the world, and the two interpretations have alternated and at times even existed simultaneously. It is necessary to understand the word philosophy in such a way that our ideas of it would provide room for both meaning at the same time. Both interpretations are valid inasmuch as they constitute philosophic reality themselves. In essence, philosophy is a way of life that consists precisely in having certain knowledge. Therefore, this way of life postulates and requires certain knowledge. Religion and art together with philosophy equally give man total conviction regarding the whole of reality, but not without essential differences. Religion is a certainty which is received by man, given gratuitously by God. It is revealed man does not achieve this certainty by himself, and he does not conquer it. It is not of his own creation, rather, just the opposite is true. Also, art indicates a certain conviction by means of which man finds himself, and from which he interprets the sum total of his life. But this belief, which is, of course, of human origin, does not justify itself. It cannot account for itself. It is, in short, unable to answer for its own consequences. Philosophy, on the other hand, is a fundamental certainty which is also autonomous. That is, it justifies itself, and it constantly demonstrates and proves its own validity. It thrives exclusively on evidence. It is always renewing the reasons for its certainty. The search for truth is so necessary that society cannot do without it. Other disciplines are necessary, but philosophy is more desirable. Human sciences, according to Strasser, can only tell us what is statistically frequent, but philosophy assures of conducts that are normal. On another perspective, philosophy may also mean that attitude to life which is characteristic of the so-called genuine philosopher, that is, one of curiosity to know, maintaining a critical attitude to life. In conformity with the Socratic dictum, the unexamined life is not worth living. openness of mind on all issues and lack of dogmatic assertions or stand, but an attitude of tolerance and readiness to examine everything without prejudice or preconceived notions. Such an attitude to life, when it is coupled with reasonable knowledge of the great issues of life, may give rise to a type of serenity, stoicism, lack of undue excitement, and indifference to inevitable difficulties. This is the kind of philosophy that began, according to Western intellectual tradition, from the 6th century BC. It was a time when man refused to take things for granted and asked questions and sought answers about the nature of the universe, man, society, and values. Furthermore, philosophy can equally be defined as the process of wisdomization, that is, to have wisdom knocked into our senses. Aristotle, on the other hand, insisted that philosophy is the rational, indubitable cognition of things in the light of their ultimate justification. It deals with being as real and with the principles and characteristics of the real. Its aim is to know things by their first causes, and as such it treats primarily of that in things which depends immediately upon those causes. Philosophy, therefore, is not interested in the secondary causes of being, but in their ultimate cause. Jacques Maritain adds that, if there be a theoretical science which seeks to account for things by their first principles, its object will be that which is the first principle in the theoretical order, namely, the first causes of everything which exists. That is to say, the first cause is naturally knowable. That science is theoretical philosophy. We could therefore summarize the purposes and aims of philosophy under the following headings. Philosophy concerns itself with all things, including those which are not accessible to the type of purely empirical verification, which the empirical sciences demand. It is therefore a vision of totality. It pushes its causal explanation beyond the limits of empirical verification to the extreme limits of metaphysical implication by applying the principles of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle to the observed contingency of all empirically discovered beings. It can conclude on the need for the existence of an ultimate cause or pure act. Once again, it provides a vision of totality which includes God. It attempts a logical explanation of the world. It aims at achieving a moral or physical certitude such that every possible absurdity is eliminated. Philosophy attempts to make sense of the world as a whole through natural and human means. This involves a rational cognition of things in the light of their ultimate meaning and justification. Philosophy attempts to understand the meaning of man's existence, of his ultimate origin and destiny. It tries to construct a system of values and ideas to justify them by human reason and intuition. Philosophy provides a critical investigation of the content, logic, and methodology, and of the basic assumptions of all forms of human endeavor, including its own. Finally, the main concern of philosophy is to question and understand very common ideas that all of us use every day without thinking about them. A historian may ask what happened at some time in the past, but a philosopher will ask, what is time? A mathematician may investigate the relations between numbers, but a philosopher will ask, what is a number? A physicist will ask what atoms are made of or what explains gravity, but a philosopher will ask, how can we know there is anything outside of our own minds? A psychologist may investigate how children learn a language, but a philosopher will ask, what makes a word mean anything? Anyone can ask whether it's wrong to sneak into a movie without paying, but a philosopher would ask, what makes an action right or wrong? We couldn't get along in life without taking the idea of time, number, knowledge, language, right and wrong for granted most of the time. But in philosophy, we investigate those things in themselves. The aim is to push our understanding of the world and ourselves a bit deeper. Obviously, it isn't easy. The more basic the ideas you are trying to investigate, the fewer tools you have to work with. There isn't much you can assume or take for granted. So philosophy is somewhat a dizzying activity, and few of its results go unchallenged for men. The origin and history of philosophy. It is impossible to say with any degree of precision at what point in time man became, for the first time, aware of his paradoxical mode of existence. It is, however, fairly safe to assume that the evolution of man to the stage of Homo sapiens was a slow and progressive one. We know for a fact that at some stage he did ask himself questions about his origins, his future, his destiny, and that he attempted to answer these questions. If wisdom consists in making sense of our existence, of our action, of our destiny, by a judicious balance of intuitive and discursive interpretation of our experience of being and of beings, then the man who asks himself such question is truly a Homo sapien. If philosophy is the love of wisdom, then the man for whom these questions are sufficiently important to devote a part of his conscious activity to is a philosopher. So, philosophizing started when men no longer accepted the methodological cum religious explanation of the world. They started by asking the question, why? Why is there being? Why is there something rather than nothing? Of what stuff is the universe made? Ex qua materia constituus mundus. Human beings everywhere asked these questions. Historical records credit the Mycenaean philosophers like Thales, and Anaximander and Anaximenes, among other 7 wise men, to be the first to systematically raise such existential questions. To the question, what is the basic stuff of the universe? Thales answered water. Water can account for the 3 basic structures of the universe: solid, liquid, and gas. The Milesians were, so to say, the first thinkers to employ the idea of a material principle or substratum as a reasoned account of reality, and with this, genuine philosophy free from methodological accounts began. The early Milesians, therefore, belong to the first historical epoch of philosophy, popularly called the ancient Greek philosophy, essentially characterized by the influence of reason. Historically, there are 5 periodizations of Western European philosophy, namely 1. Ancient Greek philosophy, 2. Medieval philosophy, 3. Modern philosophy, 4. Contemporary philosophy, and 5. Post-contemporary philosophy. The first period of ancient Greek philosophy. The ancient Greek period is divided into 3 phases, namely the pre-Socratic and Socratic, post-Socratic phases of Greek philosophy. The pre-Socratic phase spans from the